Alrighty, welcome back to the Defying Gravity podcast with Zach Goodman. Today we are going to talk some broad jumps. I'm also going to answer all your guys' Q&A questions that I've been getting. I have been doing, oh my God, so much consulting with people like over the last really like month or two. It's been insane. So I've literally been trying to get this podcast sitting down and like finally getting to broad jumps. I have some people message me, hey, when are you doing broad jumps? When are you doing broad jumps? When do you know what you're doing broad jumps? So yes, I am going to give that to you guys. I actually just cut off. I had three consults today. So I'm already a bit wired. I've already been talking, so I might as well sit down and do the broad jumps. All right. So I'm not gonna let you guys wait any further. Broad jumps. Let's talk. Okay. A lot of you guys hit me up about broad jumps. So we had an athlete go to a national showcase. We send athletes to showcases, every year, usually state wide ones, but this year with national ones really starting to come to Michigan and like being kind of towards our area. I'm not in a big area. A lot of people think Michigan, they think like Detroit or Grand Rapids. Like I'm in a smaller area of Michigan. So a lot of our kids have to travel quite a bit to get to any of these bigger showcases or go out of state to get to them. Anyways, we sent an awesome kid, phenomenal kid to a showcase. One of my best workers, a kid I've had since seventh grade. Awesome, awesome, awesome kid. Anyways, he went to the showcase, had a great day. He ran like a high 4.5 40. He broad jumped to 10.8. He had a top three L drill in the state. His skill work, his one-on-ones, didn't drop a rep, had an awesome day. But specifically, he got a lot of, I guess, publicity for his broad jumps. He jumped a 10.8 broad jump, third-party tested, verified, everything at Prep Zone, and that ended up being the highest broad jump in the country this year. So I guess, we can say we have the best broad jump in the country. He did break the high school record for those showcases. He jumped to 10.8 and he's only 5'9". He's not a super tall kid. Doesn't have freak leverages or anything. But we're going to talk about why he was able to get that number. What, mathematically, what are some things he did? What are his numbers? So that you guys can kind of reverse engineer this and hopefully get your athletes to broad jump higher. He's one of our, kids that are jumping in the tens. We have a middle school kid that's jumped 10.1. I've had tens over the years. 10 foot broad jump for a high school athlete is incredible. It's an awesome broad jump. Really broad jumps should be based off their height. If an athlete's longer, they can, obviously extend more and displace more and have a better broad jump. But when you're talking normal sized athletes, not like your 6'5" guys, but you're talking, your sub 6 foot kids jumping in the tens is incredible. It's an awesome broad jump. So that's kind of the mark that we set for all of our kids. If you're under 6 foot, we need you broad jumping in the tens, right? And if you're over 10 foot or over 6 foot, most high school kids are never clearing that. Most high school kids don't even jump, in the mid nines, which is crazy to think about how little kids are jumping that far when in reality it should be more of a norm. So we're gonna talk about how to get people there. So the first thing we have to talk about is strength. Okay, I'm the weight room guy. I'm the strength guy, right? The brief maximal tension guy. It's kind of my reputation, I guess. But really, when it comes to broad jumping, your hinge strength is so important. So most people think, I've said this a lot, the vertical jump is so reliant on squatting, right? The broad jump is equally as reliant on the hinge. And obviously, the broad jump does require a lot of squat strength, a lot of push from the legs. But really, that torque from the hip is what's really creating that kind of a whip and propulsion for the body to get out and land. So really, your broad jump performance is going to come from how much force you can produce at the hip, and then how much aerial time you can get. You can end up getting from that torque, not only from your feet but from the hip, to kind of propel yourself into the air. And then with that aerial time, okay, being able to kind of, posture yourself up and rearrange your joints to give yourself a good landing. So basically, when it comes to broad jumping, you have to have a high relative strength from any sort of hip hinge. Specifically, the hip hinges I'm preferential for as far as broad jump goes is any sort of good morning off straps. So we do safety bar good mornings off straps. If you have a back attack, those are fantastic. I don't have one yet. It is coming. I will talk about what I find with the back attack. I think I know what I'm going to find, but order one, excited. Shout out to Jared Binney, Explosive Mechanics. He's been talking about those for years. I finally am getting some, but this 10.8 broad jump never did a back attack. We kind of cut our teeth with a ton of RDLs, a ton of conventional deadlifts, deficit pulls, good mornings off straps. Okay, that's where we've really made our money out with all of our broad jumps. We've had a lot of really good broad jumps over the last couple of years. So I kind of attribute that to all the deadlifting that we do. We deadlift twice a week, really, really heavy. So the first thing is the hinge strength. All my athletes, so I went back and looked at every single kid from my first year at the school until now. Every single kid I've had clear over 10 foot has the very minimum deadlift I've had is 2.6 times their body weight. So you have to deadlift at least 2.5 times your body weight in order to broad jump 10 foot from what I've seen with my athletes and my system. And I would imagine that's pretty much universal. You have to create a lot of force from the hip. You have to create a lot of, again, a lot of torque from the hip to extend and to create that momentum, that propulsion to get up. Okay. So your hinging strength is super important. Okay. But relative to your body weight, remember, all of your explosive work is going to be chained by your relative strength. Your relative strength sets the boundaries, right? Your relative strength is your ability to overcome your own body mass, within the constraints of gravity. Okay. So that is kind of the baseline. You have to be very strong in your glutes, very strong in your hips, very strong in your hamstrings and in your low back. All of that musculature comes together to, create a very, very strong broad jump and to lower inhibition for when you land, you can actually, absorb that landing per se. But really the body with all jumping and with all high velocity movement, the body is always concerned about keeping itself safe. So in order to kind of hit that next level, you have to make it strong enough to where it feels safe to produce that force, right? So hinge strength, first thing. Second thing, RSI score of this athlete specifically has a mid four RSI score off a drop jump. So we're talking not repeats. We're talking this athlete drops off a 12-inch box and hits the ground and gets up and he's in the mid fours. So his drop jump, we did a lot of drop jumps before he went to the showcase. He got his drop jump RSI score up from a three in the 3.8s into the mid fours. Okay, his best drop jump RSI right before he went was a 4.45. Okay, he's since beaten that. But his drop jump RSI score is incredible. That's a very high level score. If you're not familiar with RSI scores, most of your high school athletes, if you test them on a drop jump RSI, they're probably in the lower threes, mid threes for your good athletes. Your elite level athletes, your college athletes are probably in the fours. And when you start clearing mid fours on just drop jumps, again, not a multiple pogo jump, but a drop jump, you're going to find that, you are going to have some crazy outputs for your kids to be that elastic. You can get them to combine not only the force they can produce, below, above the knee in their jumps. If you can get them to produce that force below the knee and to be able to jump very fast off the ground, to be very springy off the ground, you're going to notice really quickly how fast the sprints come, how much everything else improves. So our size, it's less about the score and more about the improvement of that score. Okay. But again, when you start getting over the fours, you have a pretty solid RSI score for high school and even for college kids. Because again, what I've continually seen is while you'd assume that college athletes are so much superior in output, they usually aren't. They're just much bigger. That's literally the difference. It's not the output, it's the size with the output that makes the biggest difference. Then you get to the even highest level in the NFL, the professional athletes, they just are the biggest with those good outputs, right? Um, so RSI score is very good, very bouncy, very elastic athlete. Didn't start as a supremely elastic kid when I had him as seventh and eighth grader. I mean, he was running a 5.340 as a freshman in high school. He ran a 5.3, I believe, as a freshman. He hit in the 4.8s. As a sophomore, he had a late growing spur, so he gained a lot of weight from freshman year up to sophomore year. And then he's a junior right now and then went from that high 440 and then on ours for his laser time for his fly times. I haven't got a 40 off him quite yet because the weather's just getting nice. I'm gonna have some 40-yard dash times coming pretty soon because now I can get outside and do that. But his fly times are pointing me towards he's likely going to be sub 4.5 for us with a high 30-inch vert, and maybe he might clear a 40-inch vert on the OVR, which would be the first kid I've had that's cleared 40 on the OVR on a vertical jump, not a step in, but like a standing vertical jump. I have a lot of kids knocking at that door. We just need someone to finally hit it over, and this kid's the ideal kid to do it, I think. Um, Anyways, vertical jumps. I talked about kind of that aerial time, right? So you need to be able to push enough through the ground to give yourself time in the air, essentially, right? Because with the broad jump, not only do you have to give yourself that distance, you also have to stick it in order for it to count. If you land on a shitty broad jump, they're not going to give it to you. So you have to not only create a lot of force, you have to also be able to, kind of posture yourself up and rearrange your movement and rearrange your body in air to stick a landing. So this particular athlete, he's a high 30-inch vert on the OVR. His body weight, he's 155 pounds. He actually just benched 260, which was sweet. So 1.7 whatever times his body weight. So he's a complete package kid, 4.0 student, amazing kid. Hopefully one of these colleges is going to scoop him up because really just hit his growth spurt over the last like year. So like what he's going to be able to do in another year is going to be incredible. I love this kid. If you guys can't tell, he's a fantastic, fantastic kid. So broad jumps, hinge strength, RSI score. So you got to make them very strong at the hip, very strong in all the posterior chain. You have to increase their foot and ankle strength. Okay, that is going to eliminate that kind of inhibition from not being able to go out further because they're going to feel more comfortable. The body inherently will keep itself safe. So by increasing the elasticity and the strength of the feet and the foot and the ankle, okay, and the calves, all of that's going to kind of come together into a better broad jump. Also, as far as like technique and cues go, I am very preferential to a load, explode. And so what I mean by that, it's kind of like the vertical jumps. We do a load, explode. So when we have a kid walk up to vert or to broad jump, I have them do two loads. So one, two, and then we explode in the third one. And so this kid, it creates a rhythm and momentum. Okay, this kid's really good with at least any sort of rhythm. So he is able to really coordinate a lot of that force and strength at the correct time, which allows him to get maybe further than a kid that squats more than him relative to his body weight, though he, squats very, very good for his body weight, hence the good vertical jump in the 40-yard dash, box squats. So, and his deadlift is fantastic as well. Again, hence the good sprinting and everything else. So it all comes back to hinge strength, the RSI score, and then verts. Okay. So you need to be box squatting. You need to be doing dumbbell jumps. You need to be training the foot and ankle and the calf. You need to be doing a lot of deadlifting. And honestly, for us, for the broad jumps, you might ask, how many times a week are you broad jumping? We don't really broad jump that much. That's the one thing I found, and I tell coaches this quite a bit. I haven't seen the return of doing tons of broad jumping versus just getting the hinge very strong and doing a lot of vert jumps and then doing a lot of short ground contact plyos and sprinting. Okay. Um, you can do some broad jumps, and we used to do broad jumps usually once or twice a week before. But I haven't seen a ton of return versus just investing more time in the other stuff. And again, obviously, it's proven to be at least somewhat true because this is the best broad jumps I've had since I've been here. I've had more kids right now jumping in the tens and the high nines. More young kids clearing the nines than ever before. More middle school kids clearing the nines, and more middle school kids, jumping in the 30s than ever before on the vertical jump. So that's kind of my assessment of the broad jump is those are the things you really need to focus on. Um, if in time, I'm going to talk about the back attack when I get it, what I find with it. Again, what I think I'm going to find with it is probably similar to what my buddy Jared's found with it. But programming wise, we'll see where it fits in for us. But deadlifting, you have to deadlift twice a week. Okay. As far as deadlift programming goes, some people ask me a lot. I like to do one deadlift from the hip and one deadlift from the floor every single week. Okay, so we'll do one deadlift from the hip, one deadlift from the floor. Why do we do that? To manage fatigue because we're squatting so heavy. We're also deadlifting heavy to manage fatigue and to run it in a linear fashion. We'll rotate the exercise. We'll one day a week do this exercise, one day a week do this exercise, and it really kind of creates a great way of managing fatigue without overcomplicating it all. So that's what we're doing for the broad jumps. Okay. To move into question number two. How do we structure 2 times a week training? This is a question I get a lot. Okay. Two ways you guys can do this. Firstly, run upper lower. Just keep it the same, upper lower, the same way I talk about it all the time, right? You can do that. Better way to do this than just running straight upper lower. If you want simplicity, just run upper lower. Here's what I think is the better way to do it. Okay. Combo lifts. Talk about combo lifts. I might do a whole podcast on combo lifts if you guys want a whole podcast on combo lifts, how to set them up. I prefer, depending on the schedule, obviously, if you have like a Monday, Tuesday schedule, you can't do combo lifts back-to-back days. It's not going to be productive. But let's say you train Mondays and Wednesdays or Mondays and Thursdays or something like that, where you have a few days of rest in between. You have to have at least 48 hours. Okay. You need at least 48 hours in order for musculature and for tissue to, and fibers to again begin that kind of response adaptation process. More like 72 hours when you start considering tendons in other musculature as well. And neural output. If you're also considering that your athletes are doing stuff other than lifting with you and training with you, 72 hours pretty much clears you. Okay, to not run into fatigue mechanisms that will hold back output for the next session. So 2 times a week combo lifts. I like to do, two combo lifts is my preference. If you can't do two combo lifts, do an upper lower. So we would just run how would we structure 2 times a week combo lift? Each day would run basically the same setup. We would jump. We do our jumping. Okay. Ideally, one day we would do some sprinting. I have a hard time sprinting with combo lifts. It's just so freaking taxing and like just from a mental standpoint, to get a kid to lock in, to sprint, and then also to squat and bench in the same session can be tough when you're using the brief maximal tension method. So with combo lifts, I really lean into jumping quite a bit. But the way we set it up is we'll always jump. We will bench first, then we will squat, and then we'll go into our posterior chain accessories. And so that's the way I like to do combo lifts. That's the way that I would program a 2 times a week for an athlete that plans on coming in 2 times a week for like an extended period of time. Obviously, you can't do everything if you train twice a week, right? It's kind of the main essence of it. You can't have everything all at once. There's a trade-off, right? You're trading off frequency and you're trading off some time for less sessions to accommodate whatever you're doing outside of the session. So that's really where we land as far as combo lifts twice a week. So that's the way I would structure 2 times a week training setup. Okay. Another question is how do you develop acceleration? Okay. I guess let's just talk again about like what is the driver of acceleration despite test, right? Jumping, sprinting doesn't matter. Lifting, it's all acceleration, right? You're all just propelling body mass against constraints of gravity. The number one thing is relative strength. Okay, relative strength is king. In order for you to overcome the constraints of gravity, you have to first overcome your own body mass through force. Okay, so the stronger you are at specific joint angles, relative to whatever you're testing, right? Just let's just say exercise wise, squatting, deadlifting. The stronger you are in a sumo deadlift relative to your body weight, the better you are at top end sprinting. The stronger you are in a box squat, close stance, the better you are going to be at accelerating in a jump, right? So developing acceleration, relative strength is king. Secondarily, you have to actually sharpen the speeds that you plan to play at. That specific kind of rate of force development with force sharpening specific speeds. So for sprinting acceleration, we do a lot of short distance flies, a lot of 5 10s, 10 10s. We also use the shred mill once a week, sometimes twice a week, depending on weather. But we will shred mill typically in 20-yard increments. Okay. We've done 10s with the shred mill, but I'm really a big fan of 20s. So I like to fly the other day. So really 20s is kind of where we stick around. But really that's it, man. Acceleration's simple. Get them really strong relative to body weight. Dumbbell jump twice a week. Sprint twice a week, typically with shorter distances because you can accumulate more quality reps, shorter distances versus like a longer distance fly. Usually the I guess fatigue stimulus ratio is for myself from what I see for field sport athletes it's kind of it's not something that I necessarily always prefer. I really had to do a little bit shorter flies plus just logistics wise for us for what we have to do a lot of our work short distance anyways because we're in Michigan, like it's not great weather all the time. um so jumps, squat, hinge, get really strong, get your jumps up, run your dumbbell jumps correctly loaded, go back to previous podcasts or pick up my next manual I'll talk about in a second for that. And then just do your sprinting and your acceleration will come up. There's no magic tricks. There's no secrets. It's the exact same. It's the same math at play every single time. There's no need to overcomplicate any of this. The real trick is doing all those things with frequent exposures, with proper rest, with proper loading, with a progression in mind, right? Always chasing a next PR. Okay, that's the secret to all of this. Okay. Brings me to my next thing, manuals. People have asked me, hey man, when's your next manual coming out? Two manuals everybody's asking about. Jump manual, brief maximal tension manual. Because if I paired all of our brief maximal tension stuff in with the jumps, it would be a freaking forever manual. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a squat and jump manual come together. So when you pick up the jump manual that comes out in June, I'm hoping, when you pick that up, you will have all of our jump programming from dumbbell jumps to plyo swings, okay, to broad jump training. All that stuff will be in there. I plan on giving all of our brief maximal tension squatting, deadlifting, all of our lower body training will be included in there. So basically, you're getting my Tuesdays and Fridays in that manual. Okay. Tuesdays and Friday being our lower and jump day. So that was kind of my plan is like sectioning it off because if you have my bench manual, then you have my upper body days. If you have my sprint manual, you have all my sprinting work. So you basically have 2 days a week. With the jump and squat manual, you'll have the other 2 days a week. And then at some point, I'll just do a full brief maximal tension, either like video, exclusive video, or just a manual where I just bring all the strength work together and lay it all out in one easy to pick up, setup. But I'm gonna pair the jumps and squats. I can't come out with a squat manual and not talk about jumping because that's the reason we're doing so much squatting. I can't come out with the jump manual and not talk at all about squatting because that's the biggest driver for us to get the jumps to go up is the squat. So I'm going to talk about everything we're doing, correct loading, rep schemes, waves, brief maximal tension, theory, rest periods, sequencing. I'm gonna have a troubleshoot section. This is one thing I'm excited about, guys. Is I'm going to do a troubleshoot section for my jump manual. So when people have like, I get so many questions, hey, this is happening. What do I do? This is happening. What do I do? There's so many common themes and where people start stalling out in their jumps that like I feel like I've answered a lot of these things. So I'm going to have a section in that book. I think it's going to be this troubleshoot jump problems. And I'm going to answer all the stuff that you guys have there. So if there's something you want me to include, in the troubleshooting section for that manual in June, please let me know and I will put that in there. And then for my brief maximal tension manual that I will eventually come out with, I plan to have a troubleshooting section of every single manual going forward because I think it's so important just to have all those questions there because there's so many questions that you guys ask continually. Like, you know, if you are thinking it, somebody else has the same question, right? So I just want to make sure that I make that available, make it easy for you guys that are picking these things up. Also, as things come out, people have asked me, hey, when you add new things, are you going to update the manual? Where's it going to come out at? I'm kind of contemplating between either just updating the manual as is or just including all that stuff in ultimately what the end result will be, which will probably be some sort of book or something like that. But that's a long ways away. I've been told by some friends, don't write a book, it's terrible. And been told by a friend, you have to write a book. So I don't know. But that's my answer to that question. Again, all my manuals, custom coaching, online training group that gives you guys answers to all your questions, and that gives you the program my kids are doing every week. All that's available on Gumroad. Go check it out. Instagram link, Twitter link, all that good stuff. Okay. So that should answer any questions about that people have had the new manual. That was my question 4. Somebody asked me about when's the new manual. There's your answer. Next question, jumps for large groups. This is something that people run into a little bit. I'll have a section in the jump manual talking about this, but let's talk about it right now. For those of you who listen to the podcast and support me, um, I like giving you guys free stuff. I like giving you guys information, right? So jumps for large groups. The problem that people are running into with jumps is they only have one OVR or one jump mat or this or that. Here's all you do. Keep it simple, okay? I have groups. My classes are 35 capped. My after school is basically unlimited, which means I get about 100 some kids in the weight room at a time. So I have large groups. I know your pain, okay? With the jumps for large groups, all I do is because the meat and potatoes of the workouts are always for lower bodies is jumping and squatting. I'll just split the group in half. If I have a ton of kids, half of them go jump because we have 3 OVRs, half of them will go squat and then rotate because those are always the two things we have to do first is jumping and squatting. That's where we're making our money at in the extra in the training. So I would set it up like that. The other thing you can do is if you have like one jump mat and you have 100 kids, obviously if you have less racks, I had a coach I was consulting with last week that was like, we only have 6 racks, we have one jump mat, I have a ton of kids, what do I do? You can give them a second plyo, okay? So have one group doing their jumps, have a group squatting, have another group doing an extensive plyo. So I like to have extensive and intensive every week. I talk about that in the sprint manual, what those look like. But have them do some sort of extensive plyo, then go vertical jump, and then have them squat. So that's the way I would set it up. And again, they're only doing 4 to 6 jumps, max effort, right? So 4 to 6 dumbbells, 4 to 6 verts, move on. It shouldn't take very long. They need 30 to 60 seconds of rest between. Okay, you should be able to do dumbbell jump. If you can do cleans and snatches in large groups, you can do dumbbell jumps, you can do vert. They're very easy, minimal footprint. And honestly, at this point, it's like if you don't have multiple OVR jumps, I would highly recommend you do that just because it's not just the vertical jumps you get, you're also getting RSI stuff to do as well. It opens up a whole nother domain of training. All my online clients, they always buy the OVRs. So I'm like, listen, I can give you good training. I can give you elite training. There's a difference because ultimately it's just how many tools I have access to. I can give you really good jump training, but I'm capped if you don't have a way to measure it consistently, right? I can give you really good elastic work, but I'm capped if you don't have a way to measure it. The measuring is so important. So I would make sure that you guys, if you're a coach at a high school, that your next purchase that the administration gives you, pick up some OVR jumps. I'm not sponsored at all. I like their products. They're great. We use them. We have their sprints. We have their jumps. All highly recommend. Okay. Um, Next question, sprinting to break vertical PRs. I've been having some conversation with coaches that are stalling out on jumps. Again, this would be my troubleshooting area of the jump manual. But what people are finding out is that typically, if an athlete is very strong in their squat but their jump stalls, typically the weak links in their foot and ankle. There's no better way to strengthen the foot and ankles than to do like really hard sprinting. Okay. So there's a lot of value in doing sprinting because it's the fastest stimulus you can give. And again, if you can adapt at a faster speed than jumping, you can adapt at a slower speed than jumping. Then jumping is inherently, going to come up if you're continuing to jump. So it goes back to that training the extremes. Okay. So yes, if you sprint, somebody asked, if I do sprint work, can that help me break a vertical PR? Yes, it will help you break a vertical PR because your foot and ankles and your calves are getting stronger. Okay. That's typically the weak point. If you know this, you can address it in the weight room with things like ISOs and things like marches. Okay. Things like short ground contact plyos. Okay. You need a holistic system. It can't just be sprint, where you have to have something that's well rounded. Okay. Last question, difference between middle school, high school. Okay. Difference between middle school, high school training. Coaches have asked, like, do you use the brief maximum intensity method in middle schoolers? Do you only reserve for high schoolers? Okay. Here's here's the truth. Okay. My middle school and high school don't need different training because they both have low training age. Okay. If it works for one, it works for both. Okay. The only difference is the output that each is giving. So my middle school kids typically are outputting less than the high school kids, right? They are weaker, they are slower, they are, not jumping as high. Well, some of my middle school kids can outjump my high school kids, but different conversation, right? Anyways, the principles apply. Give them an intense stimulus, give them long rest breaks, be very intentional with their work, set PRs, measure, attempt to break PR as frequently as possible. Okay. Minimal time, minimal volumes as frequently as possible. Okay. That is universal across whether you're training someone who is a sixth grader or you're training a 30-year-old high level athlete. Okay. To me, the training principles range me. How you apply that may look different, right? What's low volume for a middle school kid is different than low volume for a collegiate athlete, perhaps. Okay, but what I have found is that even my collegiate athletes I get back, they still thrive in this system with the same volume because usually when they go away to school, they don't always get the best stimulus. Okay, not all the time. Sometimes they come back solid, but most of the time they come back detrained, whether that's the fault of them playing a lot of games or it's the fault of the strength and conditioning coach being forced to do things they don't want to do from a sport coach, or it's just the fact of like maybe the strength and conditioning coach doesn't do a lot of heavy lifting or whatever. Okay, training age is low. They generally are weak relative to where they should be. They don't need different training. The couple considerations I would get if I was training one middle school kid one-on-one, which I have, a lot of my online clients are actually middle school. I always like to start my middle school athletes with free squatting first. Really, all my online athletes, I start with free squatting first because if you build a base of heel elevated free squats, you build a lot of structure, you build a lot of integrity as far as like joint range of motion goes. You also build a lot of movement coordination. Okay, box squatting is better when an athlete has a base of free squatting. So I prefer to do a lot of free squatting, more so, but I have middle school kids box squat too, right? It's not that you can't box squat middle school kids. It's the fact of the athletes need to train the range and train structure right away. And then, you can kind of progress them more towards, I guess, neuro bias, adaptations as far as like box squatting goes. Okay. That's a big difference. Other than that, the training's all the same. They're gonna bench, they're gonna squat, or they're gonna press, squat, pull, hinge. They're gonna sprint, they're gonna jump, they're gonna do it all at high intensity, all focus on PRs, all minimal volumes, all frequent exposures. Okay. Do not overcomplicate this. Just treat your athletes like athletes. They're not fragile. You're not going to break them. Just make them more powerful consistently over time. Okay. So those are the questions that I wanted to make sure I got to today. I don't know what time we're at, but I know it went, I probably expanded a little bit too much on some of these questions. But I appreciate you guys for supporting the podcast, for supporting podcasts that I've been on recently. Reviews and feedback has been amazing. I appreciate you guys so much. Again, if you're interested in any resources, obviously, free resources, podcast, my social media accounts, If you have questions, I always on X, I'm really active at like answering that stuff. Okay. Comment questions on my stuff. I will quote tweet them, comment, reply. I'm very good about that stuff. If you want, again, all the deep dive stuff, all that extra stuff, Gumroad, okay, Twitter, Instagram, it's a link down there. Go check it out. Okay. I have my manuals. I have my custom training that's for online clients. I have my online training group that gives you access to my in-person athletes training every week. So you can see exactly how it's programmed and set up. And there's more stuff on the way with that. Okay. But that has been it. I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. Peace.